Olivia Barnes yanked the stubborn zipper on the back of her borrowed black dress, just as the stage lights in the ballroom flared to life, nearly blinding her. "Of all the nights to wear something 2 sizes too small," she muttered, twisting around beside the refreshment table, only to freeze when she spotted the man walking through the double doors. He wasn't just another attendee in a tux. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved like he owned the room, and maybe he did. Because the moment he stepped in, the buzz of the charity auctions crowd shifted. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. And Olivia, with a tray of champagne flutes in her hands, forgot what air felt like. "That's Garrett Nolan," whispered a woman beside her, one of the volunteers. "CEO of Nolan Tech. He's a billionaire. Like actual billionaire, of course he was. He looked like the kind of man who'd never had to check a price tag in his life." Olivia shook herself out of it. She was just helping tonight, filling in for her friend at the silent auction, then maybe passing out hors d'oeuvres and trying to avoid spilling anything on herself. She wasn't here to gawk at billionaires. The auction was already in full swing. Items lined the tables with little gold placards: weekend getaways, private chef experiences, designer handbags. Olivia moved between guests with a small smile, collecting bid cards, gently reminding people when something was going to close. She was placing a bid card into a velvet box when someone spoke just behind her. "You're not on the bidding sheet, which is a shame." She turned, and there he was, Garrett Nolan, closer than she expected. His eyes weren't the cold, business type she imagined. They were warm, curious. Like he was genuinely interested. "I'm not for sale," Olivia said quickly, stepping back. Then she realized how that must have sounded. "I mean, I'm just volunteering, helping out." He smiled, slow and real, no arrogance behind it. "Shame," he repeated, then lifted a glass from her tray. "You've got a good eye for this stuff," she blinked. "For what?" He nodded at the painting behind her. "That landscape. Everyone's hovering around the sculpture and the spa weekend, but this one's the winner." Olivia glanced at it. "I actually hate that painting," Garrett laughed. "You're honest." "That'll get you in trouble at events like this." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not here to impress anyone." "Good," he said, sipping. "Because you just did." Before she could respond, someone called out from the stage, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our live auction begins in 5 minutes." Olivia turned to help with the chairs, but Garrett leaned in, his voice low. "You'll stay in here, right?" She gave a shrug. "I'm not going anywhere." "Good," he said again. "I'd hate to start bidding without knowing what prize I actually want." She didn't know what he meant until the third item hit the stage. The auctioneer grinned. "This next one's a crowd favorite. A private dinner with one of tonight's beautiful volunteers, our very own Olivia Barnes." Olivia nearly dropped the clipboard in her hands. "What?" The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. Her friend Lacey gave her a guilty look from the side. "I was supposed to be the dinner date," she hissed. "But then I found out I was pregnant and my fiancé said no way. I forgot to take your name off the list." Olivia stared at her. "You signed me up for a date with a stranger." "It's for charity," Lacey whispered. Olivia turned back to the stage, her cheeks burning. "Let's start the bidding at $1,000. The auctioneer called, hands shot up. 2,000. 5, 7,000. Olivia's heart pounded. She scanned the crowd. Most were smiling, laughing, treating this like a game. But then, at the back, a hand lifted lazily. It was Garrett. 25,000, he said. The room gasped. Even the auctioneer blinked. 25,000, going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Nolan. Olivia couldn't move. Garrett caught her eye, then tipped his glass to her before walking over. "I told you I'd bid," he said. "I just didn't say on what." "That was a lot of money," she said. He shrugged. "It's for a good cause, and I meant what I said. I wanted the real prize." She crossed her arms, half defensive, half flustered. "You don't even know me. Then dinner's a good place to start." "I'm not some trophy," she said softly. Garrett leaned in again, just enough so only she could hear. "I don't want a trophy. I want the woman who told me she hated a painting everyone else was pretending to love." She stared at him. Something about the way he looked at her like she wasn't just some entertainment for the night made her heart skip. "Fine," she said, trying to play it cool. "But I pick the place." He smiled. "Deal." They met the next evening at her rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. When Olivia arrived, Garrett was waiting outside the elevator in a charcoal suit, no tie, holding a single white peony. "For you," he said. She took it, stunned. "You remembered my favorite flower?" I asked Lacey. She laughed. "Figures." The dinner was easy, surprisingly easy. He didn't talk about money or power or how many companies he'd bought. He asked about her job at the non-profit, her love for photography, her dream to travel. Halfway through dessert, he leaned back in his chair. "You're not what I expected," he said. "Neither are you," she replied. He sipped his wine. "I like that." When the check came, he didn't even glance at it, just handed over a black card and kept his eyes on her. Outside, the city lights stretched in every direction. He walked her to the car waiting below. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Are you always this forward?" "No," he said. "Only when I know what I want." She hesitated, then smiled. "Then yeah, you can." As she slid into the backseat, he leaned in and touched her hand. "Olivia?" "Yeah, I wasn't kidding. I really did bid on more than just a prize." She didn't say anything, but the flutter in her stomach said everything. Olivia adjusted the strap of her crossbody bag as she stepped into the modest brick building nestled between a corner deli and a laundromat. The community outreach office was quiet, save for the hum of the copier and the faint buzz of a heater struggling against the early spring chill. She nodded at a few familiar faces, then slipped into her office, a narrow room with peeling paint, a flickering desk lamp, and a shelf of mismatched binders labeled in her own handwriting. She dropped her keys on the desk and stared at the inbox stacked with funding requests, event proposals, and a grant application she'd been rewriting for weeks. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It had been 3 days since the rooftop dinner. She hadn't expected to hear from Garrett again. Men like him didn't usually follow through, not after the cameras were gone and the charity lights dimmed. But he had called the very next day, twice. She hadn't picked up either time. She wasn't sure if she was protecting herself or just overwhelmed. Liv, Audrey, her supervisor and friend, leaned in the doorway. She held a manila folder, her expression curious. "There's someone here asking for you, says he's your friend." Olivia stood slowly. "What's his name?" Audrey lifted an eyebrow. "Didn't say. But he's wearing a coat that probably costs more than our annual budget." Olivia crossed the hall and stopped short in the waiting area. Garrett was standing beside a wall covered in photos of last year's toy drive, his hands in the pockets of a navy wool coat, his eyes focused on a snapshot of Olivia surrounded by children holding coloring books. "You didn't call back," he said without turning. "I didn't think you'd show up at my job," she replied. "I wanted to see where you spend your time," he said, glancing at her. "You said this place mattered to you." She folded her arms. "It does, but most people don't show up unannounced to make a point." "I'm not most people," she exhaled. "What do you want?" "Lunch," he said simply. "With you, nothing extravagant, no rooftop views, no $1,000 bottles of wine, just a sandwich, maybe a walk." She studied him. "Why?" Garrett looked around the room. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. And because I realized that if I waited for your schedule to open up, I'd be waiting forever." She hesitated, then glanced at Audrey, who was pretending not to listen from behind her desk. "Fine, 30 minutes. There's a food truck down the street." They walked in silence at first, the wind tugging at Olivia's coat as they passed a row of shuttered shops and a mural half finished on a brick wall. Garrett didn't try to fill the quiet. He simply matched her pace, hands still in his pockets. At the truck, she ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup. He asked for the same. They sat on a bench across the street, balancing paper bowls on their knees. "Why do you do it?" he asked after a few bites. She looked up. "Work here?" He nodded. "I grew up 3 blocks from here," she said. "My dad used to bring me to the center for free art classes. When he passed, this was the only place that still felt familiar." Garrett was quiet. "I wanted to give back," she added. "Even if it's not glamorous, it's real," he said. "And rare." She glanced at him. What about you? What made you start Nolan Tech? He gave a small laugh. I didn't want to be like my father. Was he in tech too? No, Garrett said. He was in debt. Constantly, I grew up watching him chase money like it was oxygen. I wanted to build something on my own terms. Olivia studied him. So you built an empire just to prove a point? Maybe, he said. But now I'm wondering if I missed everything else along the way. She turned back to her soup. That's not something I can fix for you. I'm not asking you to. She glanced sideways. Then what are you asking? He leaned back, stretching his legs. To let me in. Even just a little. I want to know what your Tuesdays look like. What makes you laugh when you're not trying to impress anyone. What you think about when you're staring out the window of your office. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you don't seem like the kind of man who has time for someone else's Tuesdays. I didn't, he admitted. But I can make time. They finished eating, then walked back slowly, the wind calmer now. At the entrance of the outreach building, she paused. I'm not used to this, Olivia said. Men like you, Garrett looked at her. I'm not used to women like you either. She hesitated. I have a fundraiser next week. We're short on help. It's not glamorous, you'll probably hate it. I'll be there, he said, no hesitation. She turned to go, but he caught her hand. Just one more thing, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I meant what I said that night. I didn't bid to win a dinner. I bid because I saw something I didn't want to walk away from. Olivia didn't pull her hand back, but she didn't say anything either. She simply nodded, then slipped inside before her resolve could falter. Back at her desk, she stared at the flower he'd left on the corner of her monitor, a white peony, fresh, tied with a ribbon the color of slate. She wasn't ready to trust him. But she also wasn't pretending she didn't want to. Rain began to fall just as Olivia stepped out of the bakery, a light drizzle that dusted the pavement and blurred the neon signs flickering against the street. She tugged her coat tighter, balancing a cardboard box of cupcakes in one hand and shielding them with the other. The fundraiser was less than 24 hours away, and she'd been running errands since dawn, trying to piece together a night that would hopefully convince a few donors to keep the center's doors open. She didn't notice the black car until it slowed beside her. The window rolled down and Garrett leaned slightly toward the opening, his hair damp at the edges, his jaw tense. Get in, Olivia, she frowned. How did you know I was here? I called your office. They said you'd gone to pick up the desserts. She hesitated. I'm fine. You're soaked. I'll dry. He stepped out then, umbrella in hand, and opened the back door. Let me drive you. Even stubborn people deserve to stay warm. She hesitated for a long second, then slid into the back seat. The car smelled faintly of bergamot and leather. Once inside, she caught sight of a folder on the seat beside her. Her name was typed across the front. She looked at him. What's that? Garrett glanced at the folder, then back at her. A proposal. I've been reviewing your center's financials. You're running on fumes. Her eyebrows lifted. You went through our books. You gave me access when you asked for help, he said. I took that seriously. I didn't ask for you to audit us. No, he said. You asked me to show up. I did, and now I want to do more. She studied him. What kind of more? I want to fund the entire programming calendar for the next year, all of it. No more scraping for grants. No more skipping initiatives because there isn't enough staff. She shook her head slowly. That's not charity, that's control. Garrett's tone didn't waver. No strings. No board seats. I don't want anything in return except for you to be able to do your work without worrying about whether the lights will be on tomorrow. Olivia stared at him, the box of cupcakes forgotten on her lap. You can't just walk into someone's life and try to fix everything. I'm not trying to fix you, he said. I'm trying to give you space to breathe. She looked away, the rain streaking across the window in delicate lines. What if I don't want to owe you anything? Then consider it anonymous. She turned back to him. You don't do anonymous. He was quiet for a moment. You're right, I don't, but I do it for you. The car pulled up in front of her building. She didn't move to get out. Why? She asked quietly. You could be anywhere in the world. Why are you here? Garrett didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. He handed it to her. It was a candid shot, clearly taken on a phone. She was standing in front of the mural outside the Outreach Center, laughing with a boy who'd painted a crooked sun across the bricks. Her hair was drawn back, paint smudged on her cheek. "That day," he said, "I was in the car across the street. I'd come to watch the auction venue get set up. I didn't know who you were, but you were the only person who wasn't looking at their phone or rushing off. You were just there, real." Olivia stared at the photo. "I didn't know I'd see you again," he said. "But when I walked into that ballroom and saw you holding that tray, I knew I wouldn't walk away this time." She looked at him. "That's a lot to put on someone." "I'm not putting it on you," he said. "I'm just telling you the truth." She handed the photo back, but he shook his head. "Keep it?" The door clicked open beside her and she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the box still in her hands. The rain had stopped. "You're coming tomorrow?" she asked, not turning around. "I said I would." She gave the smallest nod, then walked toward her door without looking back. The next evening, the fundraiser was in full swing inside a refurbished library near the waterfront. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and mismatched chairs surrounded tables dressed in linen and mason jars of wildflowers. Local musicians played on a makeshift stage, and kids from the program handed out cookies they'd helped bake earlier that week. Olivia moved through the room, checking on volunteers, refilling pitchers, and adjusting the donation box that had already begun to fill. She was in the middle of explaining the silent auction process to a couple when the room shifted, not in volume but in focus. Garrett had arrived. He wasn't in a tuxedo this time. No pressed suit or polished shoes. Just dark jeans, a slate button down, and sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like someone who belonged in the room, not someone towering above it. He went table to table, listening intently to a story about a summer reading program, asking about the tutoring schedule, offering to match every donation made that evening. Olivia watched from the edge of the room, arms folded, unsure whether to melt or run. Audrey appeared beside her. "That man just wrote a check that will cover our entire holiday meals initiative." Olivia didn't answer. "You're not going to push him away, are you?" Audrey asked. "I might. Then you're an idiot." When the music paused for announcements, Garrett stepped up to the mic. Olivia's chest tightened. "No speech," he said into the mic, his voice low. "Just this. I've been in a lot of rooms with chandeliers and overpriced wine, but none of them have felt like this one. So thank you for letting me be here. And if anyone wants to double their donation, I'll match every cent." Applause thundered. Later, Olivia found him near the dessert table, staring at a tray of melted chocolate truffles. "I think we overshot the temperature," she said. He turned to her. "They're perfect, a little messy, completely worth it." She rolled her eyes. "You didn't have to do any of this." "I wanted to," she hesitated. "I'm not someone who falls for grand gestures." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not offering one." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm offering time," he said. "Consistency. The kind of showing up that doesn't need to be announced." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "You're not who I expected you to be." He stepped closer. "Neither are you." For the first time since they met, she didn't have a retort. She just took his hand. 3 weeks later, Olivia stood in front of the mirror in the back hallway of the old train depot turned event space, tugging at the hem of her navy wrap dress. Her reflection looked calm, maybe even composed, but her heart was racing. Tonight wasn't about glittering auctions or whispered bids behind champagne glasses. It was the Outreach Center's first fully funded gala. And for the first time since she'd started working there, they weren't trying to patch holes in the roof with duct tape and hope. She reached for the delicate gold pendant resting against her collarbone. It had arrived in a small velvet box 2 days earlier with no card, no note. Just a single line etched on the back. For the woman who made staying feel like a future. She didn't have to guess who sent it. A soft knock tapped against the frame. Olivia turned to see Audrey peeking in, her curls pinned up in a loose twist, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Are you ready?" Olivia nodded. "As I'll ever be." The space beyond the doorway had been transformed. String lights wove through old steel beams. casting warm amber shadows across tables dressed in navy and ivory. A local jazz band played softly near the bar, and every seat was filled donors, neighbors, volunteers, and families who'd once stood in the food pantry line now dancing near the makeshift stage. Garrett had arrived before the doors opened, but he hadn't hovered. He'd made himself useful, helping set out programs, guiding guests, even folding napkins with one of the kids from the after-school group. Olivia had watched him from across the room more than once, trying to reconcile the man who signed 7-figure contracts with the one who sat cross-legged on the floor helping a 5-year-old glue sequins to a paper crown. Now, as the band wrapped up and the lights dimmed slightly, Olivia stepped onto the stage. A hush fell across the room. She took a breath, scanning the crowd. Garrett stood near the back, his posture relaxed, but his eyes locked on her with quiet intensity. 3 months ago, she began, we were deciding whether we could afford to keep our Saturday literacy program open. Now, we're fully funded for the year. Not because someone came in and waved a magic wand, but because people chose to believe in what this community could become. She paused, letting the words settle. I've learned something lately, she continued. Hope doesn't always arrive in the form you expect. It doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just shows up uninvited, inconvenient, completely unmanageable. And if you're lucky, it stays. Her gaze drifted back to Garrett. His jaw had tightened slightly, and she could see the way his hand curled at his side. I want to thank every person in this room who stayed, who showed up, who believed. The audience applauded as she stepped down, but she barely registered the sound. Garrett was already moving toward her, weaving through the tables like the rest of the world didn't exist. You weren't talking about the donors, he said once he reached her. Not entirely. No, she said, voice steady. I wasn't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I was going to wait until later, but I can't. She took it slowly, unfolding the crisp sheet. Her eyes scanned the Garrett Nolan Foundation grant agreement and her breath caught. You're offering a 5-year fund. Yes. And before you say anything, it's not a handout, it's an investment in your leadership and the center's long-term sustainability. You'll have full control over how it's allocated. I just want to make sure this place never has to choose between keeping the lights on and feeding kids again. Her fingers tightened around the paper. This is a lot. I know, he said, and I also know you don't like surprises. But I wasn't going to stand here and let you walk into another year of stress when I could change that. She looked up at him. Why? He didn't blink. Because I'm in love with you. The words didn't hang awkwardly in the air, they landed clear and certain, like they'd been waiting to be said. I didn't plan on this. I didn't expect to walk into that ballroom and find someone who'd make me want to slow down long enough to notice what I was missing. But I did, and I'm done pretending like this is casual. Olivia swallowed hard. You don't do things halfway, do you? Not when it matters. She studied him, the weight of the moment pressing against her ribs. Then slowly she slid the folded paper back into his hand. I'll accept the grant, she said. On one condition. Name it. That you stop showing up with money and start showing up with you. He looked at her like the entire room had gone quiet again. Always. The band started up again behind them and someone tapped a spoon against a glass, summoning another toast. But Olivia didn't turn. Come with me, she said, tugging his hand. They slipped outside through the side door into the chilled night air. The city buzzed in the distance, but here, beneath the old depot's awning, it was quiet. Tell me something real, she said, still holding his hand. Garrett leaned against the brick wall, watching her. When I was a kid, I used to sleep in the closet. Not because I didn't have a bed, I did, but because it was the only place I could close a door and pretend the world wasn't out there waiting to fall apart. She stepped closer, her voice soft. And now I don't want to close any doors, she nodded once. Good, because I don't want to walk through them alone. Garrett reached for her then, no hesitation, no performance. Just a man who'd spent a lifetime building walls, finding someone worth tearing them down for. Their lips met, not with urgency but with resolve. It wasn't a promise of perfection. It was better. It was real. Later that night, as they walked back into the gala hand in hand, Olivia caught sight of the mural on the far wall. A new one, painted by the kids during the last workshop. At the center was a single phrase written in bright, looping script. Hope stays where it's welcomed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The rain had returned, not in a storm but in a quiet, steady rhythm that painted the windows of Garrett's brownstone in soft streaks. Olivia stood barefoot in the kitchen, a worn hoodie draped over her shoulders, her damp curls pulled into a knot at the top of her head. She was stirring a pot of soup, humming a melody she hadn't realized she remembered until her hands started moving on their own. Garrett entered from the hallway, jaw shadowed by the start of a beard, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He had just come from a late strategy meeting with his COO, but instead of the usual intensity in his posture, there was an ease one that only surfaced when he was in this space. "Smells like ginger," he said, setting his phone face down on the counter before leaning on his elbows. "It is. My mom used to make it when we were stuck inside too long. She said it cleared out the dust in your chest." He watched her with a quiet reverence. "You always move like you're remembering something." Olivia glanced over her shoulder. "Is that good or bad?" "It's real. I like real." She handed him a spoon. "Taste," he did. "You're definitely not allowed to leave me," she laughed, taking the spoon back. "I didn't know I'd be responsible for your sustenance." "You're responsible for more than that." He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You make everything less complicated, even when it is." She leaned into the touch. "I've been thinking about something." He raised an eyebrow. "The center's been running smoothly since the gala. We put your grant to work in ways I didn't think we'd be able to. But there's still this gap: the kids who age out of our programs. They finish high school and then there's nothing." Garrett crossed his arms. "You want to build something for them? A mentorship bridge, apprenticeships, scholarships, even internships if we can get the right companies on board." He was silent for a moment, then nodded. "We'll do it." She turned. "I didn't come here to pitch you, I know, but I've already started mapping it out. I had a feeling you'd ask. You planned this. I planned for you. Everything else just follows." She stared at him, soup forgotten. "You don't flinch anymore. When we met, you were always calculating something behind your eyes. Now you just... Look." "I stopped trying to win," he said. "Started trying to stay." They ate on the couch, legs tangled under a knit blanket, the city glowing beyond the windows. Olivia scrolled through her tablet, showing him an outline of her proposal. Garrett pointed out gaps she hadn't noticed, suggesting contacts from his own network who owed him favors. When the rain grew heavier and thunder rolled gently in the distance, she rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think your world would swallow mine," she said softly. "And now, I think they were always meant to link. You just had to stop running." His fingers traced slow circles over her wrist. "I had to find something worth standing still for." Several weeks later, Olivia stood in front of the newly remodeled east wing of the center. The paint was still fresh, the sign above the archway gleaming in the morning sun, the Barnes Nolan Foundation Youth Initiative. Next to her, Garrett wore no tie, no tailored suit, just a button-down and soft leather boots dusted from helping move equipment into the new tech lab. Volunteers buzzed around them, setting up folding chairs and refreshments for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "You're sure about this name?" she asked, her fingers brushing the engraved plaque. He kissed her temple. "I'm sure about everything." By midday, the courtyard was full. Former students had returned, some holding babies, others already enrolled in community college. Donors mingled with volunteers and laughter echoed down the block. When Olivia stepped up to the makeshift podium, she didn't hold notes. Instead, she held Garrett's hand. "This isn't about what we built," she said. "It's about who we built it for. And who we're building it with." Garrett's eyes didn't leave hers. Later, when the ceremony had ended and the last guests had filtered out, they lingered in the center's garden. The air smelled of fresh soil and blooming jasmine. Olivia knelt beside a small potted tree and pressed her fingers into the dirt. "It's a lemon tree," she said. "It reminds me of my father. He always said life will always be bitter if you forget to taste the sweet." Garrett crouched beside her. "Then we'll plant it here, so no one forgets again." They stood up, brushing soil from their hands, and he pulled her close. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. She raised an eyebrow, but he didn't pull out a ring box. Instead, he handed her a folded map. She opened it slowly. It was a hand-drawn sketch of Europe, each country marked with a little star. At the bottom was a note in his handwriting. "You once said you wanted to travel. I think it's time we started collecting stories instead of just telling them." She looked up. "You want to travel with me. Wherever you go, I go. If it's a tent in Portugal or a train ride through the Alps, I want all of it with you." "But what about the company? I've built it to run without me. I've done the empire thing. Now I want to build a life." She smiled. "Then let's start with Paris." He kissed her as the sun dipped behind the trees, the last golden light brushing their faces. They left 2 weeks later, backpacks slung over their shoulders, hands laced together as they stepped onto a flight that would carry them to their first stop. And somewhere between the vineyards of southern France and the canals of Venice, Garrett looked at Olivia across a candlelit table and said the words that had been resting on his tongue for months. "Marry me." She didn't hesitate. Yes. They married on a quiet hillside in Tuscany. No cameras. No press. Just them, a few close friends, and vows whispered beneath an olive tree. And in that moment, beneath the wide open sky, Olivia knew she hadn't just fallen in love with a billionaire. She had fallen in love with the man who had once been lost in his own world, and now lived fully in hers.